Hi, I'm Mark from the local art shop.co.uk. We're talking to Rob, a local freelance artist, who is going to demonstrate for us today the use of a water-soluble graphite pencil with an aquaflow or water flow brush or water well brush on £140 watercolour paper. Pre-drawn the house out, because we don't need to teach people how to draw a house.
No.
You've got the water-soluble graphite stick. It's a full stick rather than the wooden surround one. You've got the brush. You're now going into the sort of drawing with sort of darkening up the areas and the roof and sort of starting to get the contrast in.
That's right. One of the strengths of this technique is, outside of, say, ordinary pencils, is this ability to put light and even strong washes down very, very quickly. I'm covering an area here quite quickly with a pencil, which is basically an engraving tool when you think about it. You wouldn't be able to get this depth of work. Here I'm starting to add some texture in the background, basically to give me weights and lights and give me some sort of strength to aim at. One of the things that I always find about drawing, particularly with pencil, is this inability to get the darks in early enough to see how your highlights are coming. Here I brought the dish in because I also scrape the graphite into a dish like this, so that I can.
You've also got the powder, which is it's going to give you a slightly different texture, deeper depth.
Yeah, I use between 4B and say 8B. It depends what the manufacturers have got, and it also depends on what you happen to have at the time. This is working in studio, but one of the strengths of this technique, using the brush pen and this graphite wash material, is that you can draw and paint outside very, very quickly. It's much freer. Yeah.
And I've also noticed with the way you're doing this at the moment, you're also going across the whole thing at once, so you're building up the tones which are reacting to each other, which, you know, some people would just work across the page, but you're doing it right, in my opinion, sort of making sure that you're getting the tones right across the whole thing, and it's a slow build-up.
Yeah, I must admit that to a certain extent I'm a bit and piece player. I have met a lot of artists that will go from one corner and sort of work right the way across.
But
no, that's not.
I'll say sometimes you find the contrast is wrong halfway through, though, isn't it? Because you're reacting against the white rather than the dark.
Absolutely, I can't do it. I have to build,
and you build in, and you sort of. I'm loving the fact you're bringing in the powders, which sort of bring you a nice wash, as well as straight off the pencil. You've not actually used the pencil direct, have you?
No, I never draw with this technique. I've always found, even with water-soluble crayons, anything that's water-soluble, I always find it too hard when you draw down with it. That line is almost permanent.
Yeah.
Here, I can wash lines in a very light way, although I'm doing the foliage now fairly heavily, and you'd be very, very surprised at how deep you can go and still have enough to layer dark over even the darkest layer that you do in this initial wash. I think one of the strengths of it, for me, is that you're actually drawing with a paintbrush. Here I am switching to Sable. This is the way I tend to do it when I'm in the studio. Sable brushes give you a better finish.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the Sable being a natural brush, it's biting it better, isn't it? As I say, it's picking up the water, you're getting a little bit more onto it. I mean, I personally find that the naturals work better for the watercolour and sort of this type of technique, where the synthetics will work a lot better.
My argument is, even as a professional artist, I don't spend the sort of money that these brushes cost for the joy of it. If I could get away with a toothbrush, then I flaming well would. But they are so good at what they do.
They do. I'll say, it's one of those things, unfortunately, with art, sometimes you have to pay for what you get.
Yeah. But again, with art, I mean, a paintbrush costing you, say, well, let's say I had one that cost £80 and £90 when I was working really commercially. But outside of a golf club, that's
Absolutely.
Sweet Fanny Adam, you know.
And I say, and they will keep going and going and going for years and years and
Absolutely.
years.
Here I am bringing in another paintbrush. Unfortunately, this company's gone bust. This shows you how long I've used. I've done lots and lots and lots of these paintings, whatever you want to call them, paint drawings or whatever it is. I'm not quite sure what the experts would call it. You can see I'm just adding a shadow there.
Yeah.
It's a water technique where you put a strength of colour in or a strength of tone, and then you go through it with a wet paintbrush with no colour in it. It lightens it, but it also spreads it at the same time.
All right.
It's one of the things about this, and if anybody's watching, try it out if you're frightened of watercolour, because you're only working light and darks, you're only working soft greys and hard greys and things like that, but you're painting in watercolour. And you can see as I paint, the whole thing works in a watercolour form and in a watercolour way. You put little puddles of water in and then paint into those. You do all that sort of thing.
Just a thought with this is, once it's dry, are you able to use a sort of a normal eraser to sort of erase it?
To a certain extent,
to
yeah, absolutely.
To bring it back out. So, you
Yeah.
know, so obviously with watercolour you could sort of wet it down and just wipe it all off.
Well,
but this you can be a bit more precise.
I'm going to be awkward here. With watercolour you can erase.
All right, yeah. I'll say, okay.
Yeah, that's for another one.
I was going to say, we'll do another video on that.
Yeah,
that's
that's
no
right.
problem.
But yes, you're quite right. You can erase it, but it will not erase fully.
Yeah.
But it will. You'll be able to soften. You'll be able to add technique. I've not used. I've got a gentleman who comes to some of my classes, and he uses an electrical eraser, and it works brilliantly.
I
really
sell those,
good.
and I'll say, I must admit, they are absolutely top notch. As I say, they zoom around like nobody's business. You can get a real nice point on them.
You can see here I'm putting little bits of texture in, and one of the things that is quite nice about this is that you can put textures in, then wash on, and then put textures over what you've already textured, and they don't lift off that easily. You can wash this back to a certain extent, and you'll be left with like a ghost, let's say that with watercolour, but it still has much more strength. I didn't mention when you saw the dish that I've got a stuff called ox gall in it. And any watercolourist who doesn't use ox gall and is in a hard water area, you're in trouble, pal. Because ox gall is a wetting agent. It's just really a detergent. And it allows you to put lots and lots of fine lines in. It allows you to work much more precisely. And I use it a lot with this sort of painting. You can see here where I'm painting and doing what they call a negative painting, allowing the darks to cut into and shape the things that are around them, particularly the chimney.
Yeah.
And it's as it grows, you can see that by putting the dark behind it, it's actually supporting the work in front.
Yeah. I'll say you're bringing it forward. You're not doing the traditional, as when anybody starts working, you're drawing the line, you're doing a deep dark line. You're making that dark line by putting either the background or the foreground as the dark, where it's a natural look.
Absolutely. You can see here that I've got quite a puddle of water, and I'm now pushing it. And
I was saying the texture in there is brilliant, isn't it? I was say it was just a wet on wet, quick blast. I'm assuming the brush has got some more pigment on one side than the other side, and you're just flicking it. Yeah,
you just flick it in. But to a certain extent, because this stuff, you can see I'm actually erasing. Somebody asked about erasers. And I'm just lightening some tones in the trees, and then I can actually go back over and add a little bit more leaf and things like that. But the other thing that this starts to get you to think about is shape. Trees with round leaves give a different shape than, say, the fir tree in the foreground that have got spiky leaves.
Yeah.
And if you paint them spikily, then they'll start to look
They'll get the more texture. It's a bit like when you're doing anything. If you paint in the direction of whatever it's going, it'll give you more. It'll give you more form and more reaction and reality. There,
I've done the tiles again on the extension of the bungalow, and I've added more depth to what was already there. It had already got some texture in it, and it's that ability. if you work with an ordinary pencil, because of the wax that's in ordinary pencils, it tends to slip about and it tends not to bite into the shape. So it's always that much more difficult. You can see in the corner the actual finished piece that I'm working on, which has now got the mount round it, and that.
It's fantastic. The depth and the trees and the sort of working through.
And the texture you're able to get.
I'll say the degree of sort of contrast from light to dark in it is fantastic.
And I think that's really, it's like a black and white photograph. It is that contrast. And you can see here where I've just put the bricks in and the little lines on the thatching. Yeah. Even down to leaving the post. I didn't paint, I used no masking fluid or anything like that. It's all simply painted on. But it will all work outside for you. You can sketch with this system outside, very simply.
Easy peasy.